If you
No, I really respect this guy. I think he's brilliant. What he's done, what he's accomplished, he's had 3 different careers.
Oh, he's great.
But I want to strangle him.
Sylvester Stallone isn't just an action icon. He's also been at the center of some of Hollywood's most explosive off-screen rivalries. From backstage brawls and broken friendships to ego clashes with industry legends, Stallone's real-life drama rivals anything he's done on film. But which actor faked interest in a terrible script just to sabotage him? And who turned from trusted friend to bitter enemy?
Hey, I'm a Sylvester Stallone. I'm 78 years old now. I've made $900 million.
Sylvester Stallone has built a career playing tough, no-nonsense characters who rise through grit and determination. But long before the fame, fortune, and iconic roles, Stallone was just another struggling actor trying to carve out space in a cutthroat industry. And while he's best known for his roles in Rocky and Rambo, Stallone's real-life behind-the-scenes stories are sometimes even more dramatic than the ones on the screen. One of the most talked-about moments from his early career involves a fellow actor who was also just getting started, Richard Gere. Today, both men are household names, but back in the early 1970s, they were 2 relatively unknown actors called in a small-budget film called The Lords of Flatbush, a nostalgic drama about a gang of young men in 1950s. On paper, the project should have been a good stepping stone for both of them. But what actually happened on that set sparked a feud that has reportedly lasted decades. At the time, Stallone was still very much on the grind. He wasn't just acting in The Lords of Flatbush, he had actually co-written the script. It was a deeply personal story for him, pulling on experiences from his own upbringing in a rough part of New York. He'd been taking whatever small roles he could get, and this project was more than just another gig. It was an opportunity to prove he had what it took to carry a film, not just as an actor, but as a creative force behind the scenes as well. Richard Gere, on the other hand, came into the project from a very different background. He was classically trained, having spent time in theatre and studied method acting. He had a reputation for being thoughtful, analytical, and detail-oriented in his performances. He was cast as Chico Tyrell, one of the main characters in the film. While the role wasn't particularly complicated, the difference in approach between the 2 actors quickly became clear. Stallone worked off instinct, reacting to his scene partners and following emotional beats as they came. Gere liked to think things through. He approached scenes with careful calculation, aiming for precision. These opposing styles might have worked under different circumstances, but the atmosphere on the Lords of Flatbush set was anything but relaxed. The film had a shoestring budget and a tight shooting schedule, and the crew was under pressure to make the most of limited resources. That kind of tension can either bring a team together or pull it apart. In this case, it was the latter. Things came to a head during what was supposed to be a routine car scene. The setup was simple: 4 actors squeezed into a car, running lines, preparing for the next take. It was after lunch, and everyone had grabbed something quick to eat from craft services. Just basic sandwiches, nothing fancy. Gere, seated next to Stallone, was eating one of those sandwiches loaded with mustard. At some point, a dollop of mustard dropped from Gere's sandwich and landed on Stallone's pants. On its own, it might not have been a big deal. Accidents happen. But considering the rising tension between the 2, it was enough to light a fire. Stallone reportedly reacted instantly. Without saying a word, he threw an elbow toward Gere, striking him in the head, and then physically pushed him out of the car. According to multiple reports, he shoved him hard enough that he hit the pavement. The crew froze. No one was sure if it was part of the scene or a genuine outburst. It quickly became obvious it was the latter. The atmosphere on set shifted immediately, and the director, along with the producers, found themselves at a crossroads. Keeping both actors would likely mean constant conflict. But letting one go would delay production and cost money. In the end, they made their decision. Gere was out. His scenes were reshot with another actor, and the official explanation given at the time was creative differences. But for those who were there, it was clear what had really happened. For Richard Gere, it was a difficult and humiliating experience. He didn't lose the role because of a bad performance or a lack of chemistry. He was fired over a spilt condiment and a clash of egos. And in an industry that thrives on reputation and perception, that kind of story can follow someone for years. Stallone, meanwhile, emerged from the incident with a very different reputation. In the eyes of some, he was the alpha, someone who wouldn't tolerate disrespect or chaos on his sets. He'd stood his ground, defended his project, and shown he had the power to influence major production decisions. But it also painted him as someone who could be impulsive, even aggressive when pushed. That perception would stick with him for a long time. As the years went on, both Stallone and Gere found their own path to success. Stallone skyrocketed to fame with Rocky just a couple of years later, earning critical acclaim and becoming one of the biggest stars of the decade. Gere hit his stride a bit later, with standout roles in American Gigolo, An Officer and a Gentleman, and eventually Pretty Woman, which turned him into a romantic lead icon. But despite their success, the story of their early clash has never quite faded into the background. In later interviews, Stallone has occasionally hinted at the incident without naming names, describing one co-star from the early days as being impossible to work with and overly serious about everything. He's even referred to the mustard incident in a joking tone, but the underlying frustration still comes through. Gere, for his part, has rarely spoken about it, but it's widely understood within Hollywood circles that there is no love lost between the two. What makes the story so striking is how small the actual trigger was. A sandwich, a stain, and a bad day. But in the high-pressure environment of a film set, where reputations are fragile and egos are easily bruised, small moments can carry big consequences. And sometimes, those moments snowball into long-standing grudges that last far longer than anyone expects. It's a reminder of how personal and unpredictable the entertainment industry can be. On the surface, it's about talent, hard work, and charisma. But behind the scenes, personalities clash, tensions rise, and careers are shaped not just by what happens on screen, but also by the decisions made in moments of frustration or pride. In the case of Stallone and Gere, a film that could have been a shared breakout moment became a turning point for both of them. One walked away with the lead role, and the other walked away with a story he'd probably rather forget. But Hollywood never forgets. And fans love a good story, especially when it involves two of the most recognizable names in cinema clashing before they became famous. Whether the feud is truly still active today or simply a relic of their younger, more volatile years, the incident has become part of the lore that surrounds both men. And it all began with a low-budget film, two young actors with something to prove, and a glob of mustard in the wrong place at the wrong time. By the time the 2010 S rolled around, Sylvester Stallone and Bruce Willis were no longer just Hollywood stars, they were living legends. Their careers had helped shape the action genre in the 1980s and 1990s, and their names alone carried weight at the box office. Stallone had built his legacy with the Rocky and Rambo franchises, while Willis defined the everyman hero in Die Hard. Off-screen, the two seemed to share more than just screen time and fame. For a while, they were friends, or at least friendly colleagues, respected equals within the same circle of action icons. But things changed when business got involved, and what started as a passion project ended with one of the more surprising fallouts in recent Hollywood memory. The tension between Stallone and Willis didn't stem from personal betrayal or scandal. It came down to money, or more specifically, a disagreement over how much someone's time was worth. Back in 2010, Stallone launched a new film project called The Expendables. The concept was simple but brilliant. Gather a group of aging action stars and throw them together in an explosive, old-school action film. The idea was to tap into nostalgia while giving fans a fresh dose of what made the genre iconic. For Stallone, it was more than just a movie. He wrote the script, directed the film, and even starred in it. It was, in many ways, a tribute to the era that made him who he was. And he wanted to bring his peers along for the ride. Bruce Willis was part of that original cast. He appeared as Mr. Church, a shadowy government contact who hires the team. His screen time was limited, but his presence gave the film additional credibility. He was one of the few actors who could stand beside Stallone and be seen as an equal. The first Expendables film was a box office success, pulling in more than $270 million, 0 cents worldwide. Audiences loved seeing the classic stars back in action. The second film, released in 2012, did even better financially, cementing the franchise as a new staple of action cinema. It was during the development of The Expendables 3 that things started to unravel. Stallone, always looking to improve and expand, wanted to make the third film even bigger. He aimed to bring in more familiar faces from action cinema, including Harrison Ford and possibly some unexpected cameos. Everything was progressing smoothly until it came time to negotiate Bruce Willis's involvement. According to several reports, Stallone had initially planned for Willis to return in a similar capacity as before. The role would require 4 days of filming, nothing major, just enough to give the film that added boost of star power. When Stallone's team reached out, Willis's response caught everyone off guard. He reportedly demanded $4 million, 0 cents, for those 4 days of work, essentially $1 million per day. Now, high paydays are not unusual in Hollywood, especially for big-name stars. But this wasn't just any job. The Expendables had always been pitched as something more personal, something done for love of the genre and mutual respect among the actors. Everyone had agreed to take slightly lower salaries in exchange for being part of what was, in a way, a celebration of their shared legacy. For Stallone, Willis's demand wasn't just about the money. It felt like a betrayal of the values the project stood for. Stallone refused to meet the demand. Instead of entering into drawn-out negotiations, he made a decision. He cut Willis from the film. The character was reworked, and the role was handed to Harrison Ford, who was reportedly enthusiastic and cooperative from day one. Ford brought his own legacy and professionalism to the project, which helped smooth over any gaps left by Willis's absence. But Stallone didn't leave the matter there. In an unusual move for someone of his stature, he took the dispute public. Posting on social media, Stallone referred to Willis as greedy and lazy, a blunt statement that sparked widespread attention. In an industry that often hides conflict behind closed doors, Stallone's openness was striking. It suggested how personally he took the situation and made it clear he had no interest in keeping the disagreement quiet. The fallout was immediate. Media outlets picked up on the story, and entertainment news headlines speculated on the behind-the-scenes drama. Fans noticed Willis's absence in The Expendables 3 and began connecting the dots. Industry insiders whispered about Willis being difficult to work with or overly focused on money, painting a less flattering image of someone once known for his relatable charm. Willis, for his part, never responded publicly to Stallone's comments. There was no counter-statement, no interview defending his position, at least not in the direct aftermath. Whether that was due to personal choice, contractual obligations, or PR strategy isn't clear. But the silence added weight to Stallone's side of the story. Without a rebuttal, the public narrative leaned toward the idea that Willis had simply priced himself out of a film meant to honor the spirit of old-school collaboration. Despite the drama, The Expendables 3 still managed to earn over $200 million, 0 cents, at the global box office. However, fans and critics noted that something had changed. The first two films had felt like a reunion. The third, while still packed with action and star power, lacked some of that original camaraderie. The absence of Willis, especially under the cloud of a financial dispute, took some of the shine off what was meant to be a celebration of loyalty and shared history. Over time, Stallone and Willis's falling out became one of those cautionary tales in Hollywood about friendship, ego, and the blurred lines between art and commerce. It's hard to say if the two have mended fences behind the scenes, but publicly, there's been no sign of reconciliation. It's important to note that this kind of disagreement isn't uncommon in the film industry. Scheduling conflicts, financial negotiations, and personality clashes happen all the time. But because of who was involved, two icons of the genre, it attracted more attention than most. And because Stallone chose to address it so openly, the situation became a kind of case study in what happens when private tensions spill into public view. At its core, the dispute highlights a shift that can occur as stars age and their careers evolve. What once might have been a handshake deal between friends becomes a line item on a contract. The passion projects become business deals, and the personal gets pushed aside in favor of financial concerns. For Stallone, who had poured his creative energy into The Expendables as a way of honoring a past era, that change seemed particularly disheartening. Whether Willis was right to demand what he did is up for debate. Some would argue that 4 days of work, regardless of who it's for, should come with fair compensation, especially for someone of his status. Others would point out that the tone of the franchise was never about big paydays, but about the shared experience and nostalgia. From Stallone's perspective, the integrity of the project came first, even if it meant cutting ties with a former friend. In the end, this wasn't a story about villains or heroes. It was a reflection of how even the closest professional relationships can break down under the pressure of money and expectations. It's not unusual, and it's not even particularly dramatic by Hollywood standards. But it serves as a reminder that behind the explosive stunts and on-screen chemistry, real people are negotiating real compromises, and sometimes they can't find common ground. In the late 1980s, both Sylvester Stallone and Eddie Murphy were riding high. They were among the biggest names in Hollywood, with Stallone dominating the action genre through iconic roles like Rocky Balboa and John Rambo, and Murphy leading the comedy box office with hits like Beverly Hills Cop and Coming to America. At the time, their friendship stood out. They weren't just acquaintances crossing paths on red carpets. They were reportedly close. They attended events together, supported each other's careers, and shared in the success of an industry where trust can be hard to come by. Their connection was genuine, at least according to those who observed them during this period. Both men had come from humble beginnings and understood the pressure of staying on top in a ruthless business. For a while, that common ground seemed to bind them together. But in 1987, during the production of Beverly Hills Cop 2, that friendship started to break down. The situation that unfolded wasn't just about work. It became personal, emotional, and ultimately irreparable. At the center of the issue was Brigitte Nielsen, who was married to Stallone at the time. Nielsen had a role in Beverly Hills Cop 2, and her appearance was noticeable. She was already known to the public both for her on-screen performances and her high-profile marriage to Stallone. While there's never been concrete proof of anything beyond speculation, what started as whispers about Nielsen and Murphy's dynamic on set quickly turned into a full-blown rumor mill. According to entertainment media and several tabloid accounts from the time, people on the set of Beverly Hills Cop 2 noticed that Nielsen and Murphy were unusually close. They were often seen chatting and laughing, which might not seem unusual on a film set. But when someone involved is married to another high-profile actor, even the smallest gestures can be magnified. The tabloids soon picked up the story, suggesting that there might be more to the relationship than simple friendship. In Hollywood, reputation is everything, and perception can matter more than reality. For Stallone, reading about his wife in gossip columns alongside his friend must have been unsettling. Even if the stories were exaggerated or completely false, the emotional impact was real. Being in the spotlight means every private issue has the potential to become a public embarrassment, and this situation put him in a difficult position. Rather than go through intermediaries or issue a vague public statement, Stallone took a direct approach. As has been reported by multiple sources over the years, he allegedly called Murphy himself. The conversation, according to those familiar with it, wasn't casual. Stallone wanted answers. He reportedly asked Murphy directly if anything inappropriate had happened between him and Nielsen. The question was straightforward, and the tone was reportedly serious. This wasn't a matter for managers or agents. It was a personal call between two men who had once considered each other friends. Murphy denied the rumors. According to him, nothing had happened between him and Nielsen. But in situations like this, the damage is often already done. Trust, once questioned, is hard to fully restore. Even without concrete evidence, Stallone found himself in a position where he could no longer look at his friend the same way. The fallout wasn't dramatic. In the way some Hollywood feuds play out in public, there were no fiery interviews or public arguments. But the silence that followed was even more telling. They stopped appearing at events together. If they happened to be at the same function, they reportedly kept their distance. Over time, their connection faded into nothing. The friendship that had once seemed authentic had been reduced to awkward avoidance. People noticed. Industry insiders began to speculate, and for years the story of their falling out remained one of those unconfirmed but widely believed Hollywood tales. To this day, the actual facts of what happened, if anything, between Nielsen and Murphy remain unproven. Nielsen herself has never publicly addressed the rumors in detail, and Murphy has always maintained that there was nothing inappropriate. But in Hollywood, rumors don't need to be proven to have consequences. Stallone, whether based on suspicion, emotion, or a sense of betrayal, chose to distance himself, and Murphy, by most accounts, accepted that and moved on. The situation illustrates how fragile relationships can be in the entertainment industry. Fame, money, and success offer enormous opportunities, but they also come with a level of scrutiny that can wear down even the strongest bonds. For Stallone and Murphy, what might have been a simple misunderstanding became a turning point. When trust was broken, or even just questioned, the friendship didn't survive. Years later, Murphy would reportedly reflect on the fallout with some regret. He acknowledged that it was unfortunate things fell apart so quickly, but by that point the moment had long passed. Both men had continued with their respective careers. Stallone remained a central figure in action cinema, and Murphy continued to work in comedy and drama, maintaining his star status through different phases of Hollywood. The impact of the feud wasn't necessarily visible in their work. Neither actor made public digs at the other, and there was no apparent attempt to compete head-to-head in the same genre. But among fans and industry watchers, the separation was clear. Where once there had been mutual support, now there was distance. It's also worth considering the pressure each of them was under at the time. For Stallone, the late 1980 Fs were a period of transition. He had enjoyed enormous success with Rocky IV and Rambo First Blood Part 2, but the industry was shifting and maintaining momentum was difficult. Murphy, meanwhile, was entering his peak, pulling in massive audiences and redefining what a comedy superstar could be. The contrast in their career trajectories might have added another layer to the emotional complexity of their fallout. Friendships in Hollywood often come with an unspoken expiry date. With busy schedules, egos, and outside pressures, even the most authentic connections can fade. But what made the Stallone-Murphy story stand out was that it seemed to begin from a place of real camaraderie. Their split wasn't just a business disagreement or a clash on set. It was personal, and those are often the hardest to reconcile. While the two men never rekindled their friendship publicly, there's been no sign of lingering hostility either. In some ways, that's even more reflective of how things usually unfold in Hollywood. People grow apart, move on, and keep their focus on the next project. There are no dramatic reunions or emotional apologies, just distance and silence. For fans, the story remains one of the more intriguing what-ifs in recent memory. What if the rumors had never started? What if there had been more trust between the two men? Could they have worked together again, maybe in a film that brought both of their talents to the screen in a new way? We'll never know. But the story stands as a reminder that even in an industry filled with make-believe, the emotions behind the scenes are very real. Their first major encounter took place at the Golden Globe Awards in 1977. Stallone, riding high from the success of Rocky, attended the ceremony with the hope of picking up a few wins. What he didn't expect was for a new face in town, Arnold Schwarzenegger, to begin stealing the spotlight. Schwarzenegger, fresh from his breakout role in Stay Hungry, had just won the Golden Globe for New Star of the Year. According to various reports, the night became uncomfortable when Stallone, disappointed by Rocky's losses, noticed Schwarzenegger laughing and celebrating throughout the evening. Stallone has claimed in interviews that the laughter seemed to be directed at him, whether or not it actually was. It all culminated in a moment that's since become part of Hollywood lore. Stallone, fed up and emotional, allegedly threw a bouquet of flowers at Schwarzenegger across the room. That action may have been impulsive, but it sparked a rivalry that would last for over a decade. Throughout the 1980s, both men dominated the action genre. Stallone led with films like Rocky II, Rocky III, Rocky IV, and First Blood, which introduced the world to the brooding and highly capable John Rambo. Schwarzenegger, not to be outdone, responded with Conan the Barbarian, The Terminator, Commando, and Predator. The films weren't just blockbusters, they defined the style and tone of the era's action movies. For much of the decade, it seemed like every project one did, the other would answer with something bigger, louder, or more muscular. Their rivalry wasn't subtle. In fact, it often played out publicly and even worked its way into their films. In Twins, Schwarzenegger's character walks past a Rambo 3 poster and sneers at it. It was a small moment, but audiences understood the reference. Stallone, for his part, responded with a scene in Tango and Cash, in which he beats up a character resembling Schwarzenegger. These moments were playful on the surface, but they were underpinned by a real competition between two stars who were constantly trying to outdo one another. Behind the scenes, the stories grew even more colorful. One of the most well-known involved the 1992 comedy Stop, or My Mum Will Shoot. It's been widely reported, including by both actors themselves in later interviews, that Schwarzenegger read the script and immediately recognized it as a weak project. But instead of simply turning it down, he allegedly pretended to be interested in taking the role. Word got out, and Stallone, determined not to let Schwarzenegger get ahead of him, rushed to claim the part. The film was released to poor reviews and disappointing box office returns. Many consider it one of Stallone's weakest performances, and the behind-scenes manipulation by Schwarzenegger only added to the embarrassment. Interestingly, while they were professional rivals, they were rarely direct enemies. There were no public fights, no legal disputes, and no confrontations that escalated into personal attacks. Instead, their rivalry was based largely on one-upmanship and media-fueled speculation, but it still had an effect. The pressure to outperform the other influenced the types of roles they took, the way they trained, and even the kinds of scripts they approved. Some in the industry have speculated that the constant comparisons may have even pushed them into roles they otherwise wouldn't have taken, simply to maintain their status as top-tier action stars. By the early 1990s, the genre that had made them famous began to shift. Audiences were changing, and the over-the-top, muscle-bound hero started to feel out of place in a more cynical and sarcastic film landscape. Both actors struggled with this transition. Stallone starred in Demolition Man and Judge Dredd, while Schwarzenegger had Last Action Hero and Junior, the latter being a film in which he plays a man who becomes pregnant, a role that confused many fans and bombed at the box office. As the decade wore on, it became clear that both actors needed to adapt, and oddly enough, this realization may have been what finally brought them together. By the early 2000s, the rivalry had cooled. Both stars had taken hits to their careers and recognized the value of collaboration over competition. Their first major team-up came in the Expendables franchise, launched by Stallone in 2010. Schwarzenegger appeared in a supporting role, and while their screen time together was brief, it symbolized a turning point. They were no longer trying to outshine each other, they were now working as partners, celebrating a shared legacy. In the years that followed, they collaborated again in Escape Plan, a prison break action thriller that marked their first real co-lead film. The chemistry was strong, and fans were thrilled to see the two titans finally join forces. Their camaraderie was now genuine, and interviews at the time showed two men who had not only buried the hatchet, but had developed real respect for one another. And in interviews, Schwarzenegger has said that the rivalry helped him push himself harder and strive to improve. Stallone has echoed similar sentiments, admitting that competing with Arnold forced him to stay in top form. While the tactics may have been petty at times, flower throwing, casting trickery, movie poster jabs, the underlying motivation was clear. Both men wanted to be the best, and each saw the other as the standard to beat. The story of their rivalry is often retold with a sense of humor now. Stallone has joked about "stop or my mum will shoot," and Schwarzenegger has admitted to setting the trap. What might have once been sources of frustration are now viewed as anecdotes from an earlier, more competitive phase of their careers. They both appear to understand that without the rivalry, their legacies might not have been as rich or as entertaining. Looking back, the Stallone-Schwarzenegger rivalry wasn't just a battle between two egos. It was a defining feature of 1980s and 90s cinema. Their feud helped shape the action genre, created some of the most memorable film moments of the era, and ultimately led to a partnership that fans continue to enjoy. It's also a reminder of how competition, when channeled correctly, can lead to growth and mutual respect. Today, both men are recognized not only for their action film legacies, but for their broader contributions to entertainment. Stallone has earned respect as a writer, director, and producer, while Schwarzenegger has expanded into politics, business, and philanthropy. Their careers have evolved, but their impact on pop culture remains. And part of that impact is forever tied to the story of two men who started as rivals and ended up as allies. Their story is unique because it blends the cinematic with the real. The fights weren't always just on screen. The rivalry, the missteps, and the eventual reconciliation, all of it contributed to a narrative arc that feels like something out of a movie itself. But unlike their scripted roles, this was genuine. Two men competing at the top of their game, learning from each other, and ultimately realizing they were better as collaborators than competitors. For fans who grew up watching Rocky, Rambo, The Terminator, and Predator, the journey from rivals to friends is a satisfying ending. It shows that even in a business driven by image and competition, growth and humility are still possible. And sometimes, the best rivalries don't end with a winner, they end with mutual respect.